What's up, guys? Welcome to Voicey here. This is your host, Captain Zach, and today's subreddit is r/IDontWorkHereLady. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story's called Karen Tells Me to Arrest Shopper. A little setup for what happened. I am a 21-year-old guy working security for an HOA in Texas. I had just ended a 13-hour overnight shift, which had put me into a tired grump mode. My wife was 6 months pregnant and asked me to pick up some groceries on my way home. I agreed. I was picking up the last of my groceries when I feel a tap on the back and a high-pitched, "Officer, I need you now." I look up and see a middle-aged woman who looks like she had pure rage in her eyes. I start to explain that I am not an officer when she cuts me off, yelling, "I don't care, now!" and grabs my arm. At this point, I am beyond annoyed, but also want to help in case something was actually wrong. Person injured, attacked, etc. While security officers are not the police, we are required to render aid if able while in uniform. I follow the lady to the next aisle to find a woman and her child shopping. I ask Karen what she needs and she exclaims, "She stole my food! Arrest her now!" The other woman looks back confused and says, "What?" "You know what you did, you bench! That was my pork roast and it was the cheapest one! Give it to me now!" The other woman and her start arguing. Me, being way too tired and too disinterested, turn around to walk away when I hear, "Where the f*** are you going?" Still walking away, I reply, "Back to shopping." Next, I feel something tug on my waist. I instantly turn around to see that Karen took my handcuffs out of my duty belt and was running back to the other woman, screaming, "You're under citizen arrest!" And she actually tries to handcuff her, and fails. I race towards her to get my handcuffs back while she is trying to handcuff this woman, which I'm going to take a wild guess and say she didn't actually steal Karen's food, and she yells at me to stop and hits me in the nose with the handcuffs hard enough to make my nose bleed. Okay, now I'm angry. I yank the handcuffs from Karen, grab her and turn her around, putting her hands in the handcuffs. She screams, "Help, he's attacking me!" I tell her to sit down and shut the hell up while I call the police. By this time, a store manager heard what was going on and came over. "What's going on here?" To which Karen exclaimed, "He is trying to attack me! Help me! He is going to kidnap me!" I'm on the phone with 911 at this point, who said they were sending someone over. After I hang up, I explain to the manager what happened. He says he will have asset protection pull the footage and tells us to stay put. About 5 or so minutes later, 2 officers show up, one of whom I know from when I have to call the police at the HOA. He greets me and asks for my side while his partner interviews Karen, who is now full-on crying, saying, "He hit me and tried to kill me." Finally, the manager comes back stating he has the footage for us to view. The other officer goes to the AP office to view footage while I talk to the officer I know. A few minutes later, the other officer comes back and asks me and the lady she was arguing with if we would like to press charges. Apparently, when I turned to walk away while they were arguing, Karen hit the other woman in the gut. We both say yes. Apparently, in Texas, if you assault a uniformed security guard, it is upgraded and is the same charge as assaulting a police officer. She was hauled off into the back of a squad car and charged with assault of a public servant, state jail felony, assault when she hit the other lady, attempting to falsify a police report, failure to give identification with criminal intent. She gave officers a fake name, and get this, she also had an outstanding warrant for theft of service. Go figure. Karen will have a lot of time to think if that pork roast was worth it. I got my groceries and went home to tell my wife what happened. I swear to God, man, none of these country kids wait, okay? They turn 18, oh, I'm pregnant. This story's called, "Just Because I'm Wearing Scrubs Doesn't Mean I Work Here." This happened to me last week. I'm a registered veterinary technician, so I wear scrubs to work. They have the veterinary clinic name plus a dog and cat embroidered on one corner of the shirt. My grandma was in the hospital, so I went on my lunch break to go visit her and eat lunch from the cafeteria. I went down to the cafeteria and got some surprisingly good food, which is BS because every time I've been a patient in the hospital, the food sucked. As soon as I was in line to pay for my food, it dawned on me that I had no idea if food was allowed in the patient rooms. So I turned and asked the nurse behind me if that was allowed. She gave me the benchiest look and said, really snarky, "You should already know the answer to that." I was taken aback. All I did was ask a simple question. Then I realized I was wearing a jacket that was unzipped and covering the logo on my scrubs. I immediately pulled the jacket back and said, "I don't work here, you don't have to be so rude." She suddenly changed her tone and probably realized she messed up. She told me that, yes, it was okay to take my food up to my grandma's room in a much nicer voice. It's awful that if I was a nurse, she'd be that mean to me. I definitely learned a lesson. If I'm still in my work clothes at the hospital, I'm not gonna wear a jacket. Okay, y'all are gonna crucify me for this, but honestly, I don't think the nurse's reaction was that bad. Like, first of all, the tone could be very much up to interpretation. Like, she could have been annoyed because a nurse should know if food is allowed in guest rooms. But then again, she could have been nice, but I don't know. I feel like you should know this as a nurse because I don't know. Nurses in the comments, please let me know if I'm being stupid. Just kidding, I didn't have to ask. This story's called, "This Isn't a Taxi, This Is My Mom's Car." I'll start off by saying that this is technically more of a "I do work here, but this is my day off" story. I live near a rather popular but small party town. Every day during the summer, and every Friday and Saturday outside the summer, the bars and clubs open up and ton of both locals and tourists come to party it up. Since the region is quite spaced out and we're not in the US where 2 hours is considered a casual drive, most partygoers opt to call a cab to get to and from the clubs. This is usually where I come in. See, my boss really loves New York, so he imports secondhand New York taxis to use here. Since we're the only ones in the country driving them and we have the cheapest rates of all the cab companies around, we're the most popular and often the first someone will call if they need a cab. Now, the part about us driving New York taxis is kinda important because these cabs are incredibly out of place and easy to spot. They're bright yellow, have large printing on them of the company name and phone number, have the little sign on the roof, and have a specially colored license plate that indicates it is a legit taxi. Now, I had the day off since it was a Friday during the winter. So there isn't enough to do for both me and my colleague, so we take turns every other week. I'm not much of a party animal or a drinker for that matter, so even my days off, I'd rather just stay at home and play video games. This night, I was at home when I get a call from a group of friends that were out partying. They stupidly convinced their friend that was supposed to be their designated driver to have a few beers with them, and things got out of hand, so they asked me if I could pick them up. I said sure and got my mom's car. My own car only having one passenger seat. Now, remember what I said about the New York taxis a few lines back? Yeah, my mom's car did not tick any of those boxes. It's a large grayish Volvo station wagon, obviously with no signs or the appropriate license plate to be a taxi. I get to the clubs about 15 minutes before they close. Locals with a sense of how the taxi rush works when all the clubs are close are smart enough to leave early so they have an easier time finding a cab that's available. Of course, while these people are just barely smart enough to figure this out, they are also too drunk to have a decent eye for detail. To them, any car that parks in front of or near the clubs is a taxi to them. Just like I do when I am actually on the clock, I lock my doors and tend to only open them once my friends are here. But unfortunately, my mom's car is getting older and the back doors didn't lock properly. Before I have a chance to react, 4 drunkards shove themselves into my back seat. One of them even reaches to the front and unlocks the front passenger door for 2 other guys. Now, I'm taken aback by this display, but the act of unlocking the door really gets me. I already hate it when people do this when I am working. So for them to do it when I'm not is even worse. My boss does not subscribe to the customer's always right mentality. When we're driving, we are king and our cab is our kingdom. You can enter my cab when I allow it. Now, I have 6 randos in a car meant for 4 passengers, and I'm trying to tell them to get out, but they're all singing like loud drunks, so they don't hear me. As I'm trying to get through, I do hear bits through the singing of one guy drunkenly trying to tell me where they need to go. And after a few repeats, he gets more irate as I'm obviously not going anywhere. I give the volume knob of my radio a good spin, and the short blast of sound is successful at shutting these dip craps up. With them all quiet now, I tell them again that they need to get out as I'm not taking them anywhere. They get pissy, just tell me to drive and not to worry about it. As they apparently completely misunderstood what I said, I repeat that they need to get the heck out of my car. I'm not a taxi. Two of them say they recognize me from last week, which is entirely possible since I was working last week. So I'm obviously a taxi driver and I just need to take them home. Not that I never actually understood the guy that was telling me where they wanted to go. So even if I wanted to, which I didn't, I had no idea where home was. They tell me to take them to the same place I brought them last week. Now, I am absolutely horrible with faces. Add to this the fact that I'm a very down-to-business person, so I tend not to really look at the faces of my passengers. So, even if I did bring them home last week, I wouldn't for the life of me know where that was a week later since I had no idea who these buttholes were. I tell them that even if I knew where they needed to go, I'm not a taxi driver and they need to get out. Also, even if I was a taxi driver, at least one person would need to get out since the New York taxis only have seats for 5 people. Now comes the icing on the cake. One of the drunkards in the backseat decides that now is an amazing time to freaking throw up in my mom's car. I'm livid, but decide to take the middle road between privates and work policy. At my work, we have a few policies regarding the stuff that goes on in the taxis. Some obvious, some less. No alcohol, which especially Germans don't seem to understand, and no glass bottles, actually prohibited by law since it could be used as a weapon. No smoking or vaping, no touching the driver. If you throw up, you either clean it up or you pay €100. Some of these jerks were too far gone to clean it up, and were more likely to just make it worse. The absence of tools to clean it with at all didn't help either. I repeat again that they need to get out of my car, and I add that they need to pay me €100. The guys that apparently rode with me before were aware of the €100 policy and were obviously still under the impression that I was on the clock. But they were still hesitant to pay since, obviously, €100 is quite a lot of money for twats their age. They start making a scene which rocks my car all over the place, attracting the attention of 2 police officers. With how busy the clubs can get, the area is heavily patrolled during party hours. They come over and ask me what's happening. One of them bends over and looks into the car, seeing the passengers all packed like sardines.
You know you aren't allowed to drive like this, right?
I know, and I wasn't going to, but these jerks won't get out, and they throw up in the back.
May I see your cab license?
I'm not here as a cab driver. I was just here to pick up some friends, which these guys are not. One of the police officers had seen me before and checks my dashboard. No taximeter. She checks my license plate, which is obviously just a regular plate, and she notes my frustration at the people in my car. A few minutes later, my friends finally arrive to the sight of 2 cops pulling drunks out of my car, with one dip crap yelling at me why I don't want to make money. I believe another yelled the classic, "We pay your salary," comment, which, spoiler warning, they don't. Most of the company's income comes from special reservations, and I get paid by the hour, not customer. So their contribution to my salary is minimal to non-existent. I, for some reason now lost to me, try to explain to them, which was like explaining the concept of Schrodinger's cat to an actual cat with how drunk some of them were. The cops, blessed as they are, knew all too well how annoying it was to clean puke from fabric. So they enforced the technically not applicable to my situation policy of €100 for throwing up in my car. My friends get in the car. Luckily, with 3, no one had to sit in the puke, and I thank the officers for their help and want to drive off. But not before checking my rearview mirror, where I see these buttholes angrily walking towards another cab. A bright yellow cab. My colleague who was actually on shift. I quickly grab my phone, I wasn't driving yet, and I open an app we use for work that basically turns your phone into a walkie-talkie, hoping my colleague decided to log in despite being on his own tonight. He was. I quickly tell him to not take these people with him. The mention of vomit was all the confirmation my colleague needed to leave these guys standing. With the other cab companies already swamped with reservations, I can already imagine how long these guys had to wait for a cab to pick them up. At least it would give them time to sober up. In the end, my friends and I are driving home. I'm still somewhat irate, but we managed to have a laugh. Only soured somewhat by the equally sour smell coming from the back. We get home, my friends pass out on the couch, I clean the vomit before it sets, and put 80 of the 100 euros underneath my mom's phone in the living room since it was her car. Epilogue. The next day, my mom was not happy after hearing this story, but there was no trace of the vomits and she got 80 euros out of it. I did receive an email from my boss asking for my side of the story regarding a complaint he received on a day I wasn't even working. He promptly trashed the complaint after hearing my side, and that's honestly the last I heard about it. My friends each chipped in a 20 and bought me a game for the help and trouble. So now I'm playing Breath of the Wild. There was sadly never a true "I don't work here, lady" moment, since considering the context, it would be a partially false statement. But I was still technically confused for an employee. I did get 20 euros and an amazing video game out of it, so I'm fine with it. Okay, first of all, that definitely was an "I don't work here, lady" moment because you weren't in your place of work, which is your cab. Okay, you were in your mom's car. So, again, you don't work there. Second, Breath of the Wild is amazing, I hear, but I don't have a Switch yet, so I don't know. Third of all, that was really sweet of you to give your mom most of the money because if you didn't tell her, there probably would have been no way she would have known anything had happened. And you would have kept 100 euros. Fourth, you're a good friend. Fifth, your friends are good. You know, they got you an amazing game. This is a good story. I like it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.